Hello everybody, thanks for joining. So I'm Julie Ford, a self-taught artist, and the whole thing about these evenings every Wednesday 7:30 is to just paint along with some lovely pictures in watercolour and just enjoy a bit of community and a bit of painting. They're suitable for beginners as well as people that have been painting for a while. I just pick my favourite scenes. So it's lovely if you've joined us. We're going to paint tonight. We're going to do this scene which is of boats on the Deben estuary in Suffolk. I took the photo only a couple of weeks ago, and I've actually done a few versions of this just to try them out, and I've learnt things along the way. So I'll tell you what I've learnt. This was the first one, and what I struggled with a bit with this one, and it taught me, was I lost the nice vivid greens in this one and the grass, as you can see. I quite like my boats, and I painted over the poles, and I wanted to move these over a bit so that I didn't have one in the middle and one at the end. But I then went on to do this one, and with this one I actually painted over the boats, and I will be doing a little tutorial on how to repair mistakes, because that's one of the great things about joining in with this sort of thing, is we learn by doing. I certainly learn by doing, but we also learn by watching other people make mistakes, and I certainly make a lot. So I've developed all sorts of different ways to make amends. So this was the second one I did, which I was happier with. Managed to capture the lights, but my washes could have been better. So we'll put that one aside. My materials that I've got are, I've just got a selection. These are actually travel brushes because all my stuff's in storage. So I've got some travel brushes, a couple of big wash brushes, a very thin rigger, but equally that gives me nice thin lines, a pencil, I've got some white gouache, I've got rubber putty, and I did suggest to people that they draw it out first and mask the boats, basically, because I painted over my boats before. But then I thought, well, if people are watching and they haven't done that, then I do need to give everyone an opportunity to start from scratch. But also it's worth me talking through the line drawing and how I would approach it, because one of the things I got wrong in the first one was actually the size of everything. So if you look at the jetty, so the end of the jetty to the beginning of the boat is practically the same distance as that boat, and this boat's a tiny bit shorter and then the same distance again. So it makes it a bit easier to draw that out. I mean, you can trace it, which I have also done. I also have a sneaky old ruler here in case I wanted to get the edge of my jetty in correctly. So I am going to draw it out quickly. It shouldn't take too long. I don't want, as you can see, one of the things I did in my first picture was to have my horizon right across the middle, and I didn't really want that. So I'm going to try and keep my horizon a bit further down. I don't want it dead on centre. So that's my horizon. That doesn't need to be too straight. Now I am not going to mask out. I'm going to paint around my boats. And as I said, we've got similar distances. So 1, 2, a little bit less. So I want my jetty to come about just before a third of the way over. So I'm going to bring it back here. If I have my jetty there, and I can rub some of these lines out. That's basically my jetty. I don't want this post in the way. Now I will probably, because I haven't masked, I will probably paint over this and then go back in afterwards with gouache. And I didn't want this one right on the end of the page. And gouache is just basically opaque watercolour, and it's always worth having because it's fantastic for highlights. So the background doesn't have to be too rigid. I want this post to come up a little bit over the background. In the photograph it actually comes dead in line, if you can see, and that's not really ideal. And this is right in the middle, so I didn't want that right in the middle. So I've tweaked it a little bit, and just some of these lines in here. That goes up higher. And the great thing is, if you're watching the recording, you can pause it. So I didn't have too many technical hiccups tonight, except my friend Jackie was on when she heard me say a very rude word when it started. Right. I'll edit that out. So here you've got the water. Actually, I've taken, no, that's fine. That's fine because this splits here. So this is the jetty and this is the water. That's going to come along like that. And then, because I'm working the same size, it's very easy for my measurements to be correct. If you're trying to make it bigger or smaller, it's a bit harder. As you see, I've put my post in a different place, but don't worry too much about that. The actual boat here is in line, and I can even, this is a really good, I'm all for tricks and tips. You can even do it this way so that you get your measurements right. Look at that. Make life easy for yourself. Even the masters did. Who am I to argue? That's the boat. That's the bottom of the boat. And this is the top of the boat, so that mirrors exactly. And then if that is the top of the boat, that doesn't come all the way to the top of the jetty. It's got a slight angle on it, don't forget. And then this side comes down. That's your rough boat shape. This is where the reflection meets. So the most important bits to keep white is this boat. Is this, yeah, the boats where they're high lit, where they're lit. This one comes up here, and again got a tiny little bit of looks a little narrow, and I'm just putting where the shadow comes in the reflection. So that will, I can leave all of that, and then I can rub the drawing out afterwards if I want to. Now my reflection for my post is going to come down from the bottom. And then this kind of goes away a little bit. Just check your angles, because these go at an angle so they look like they're going away. Now, if you've had a chance to mask yours out, you'll be able to do the lovely blue all the way across. I changed it slightly with this. I put a sky in with a bit of sort of pattern, so it wasn't just completely flat washes. You can do it how you want, it's your interpretation. And what I might do is do more of a flat wash this time, because I like this strip of pattern through the middle, so I might try and make it more like the photograph. So one of the things I learned also about doing this one was keeping my washes clean. That is why I didn't get this vivid green. So I would advise you to mix your colours first. Mix plenty of blue for your sky and water, and mix some of your greens for your background, so that you're ready to go when we start putting the wash in. Oh, actually I can get the photograph in the screen, which is quite handy. What I don't have in the screen is my mixing palette. So I'm just using a plastic palette, but I find it's useful because it's got ridges. You can build up quite a bit of a mix, quite a bit of liquid, so to speak. So I'm trying to keep my colours mixed in the same area, and I'm going to use a cobalt for my sky. You need more pigment than you think you do, and if you're working with student colours, it's harder to get the pigment out. You have to scrub more, which is why it's just worth investing in the artist quality ones, because they go so much further. They are just much easier to work with. I think the student ones are great if you're doing sketches, you're out and about and you want little bits of paint to sketch with. The other thing is to have 2 pots of water, one to wash your brush off and one to dip it in before it goes into the next colour. So the next colour I want to make sure I've got nice and ready is that brilliant green. And I'm going to try to use only a few colours, because it keeps your picture looking harmonious. I don't need too much of that green. I do want a graded wash, so I've got 2 choices there. I can either start with lots of pigment at the top on wet paper, and as it comes down, without adding more, it will get paler and paler, or I can add in a different colour like I did with this one. But I think because I've done that with this one, I'm actually going to just do extra pigment at the top and work my way down. Some of the other colours I want some of that lovely rusty orange. So I've got a bit of burnt sienna here, and I'm just going to mix a little bit in. I don't need a lot, so I'm going to mix a bit of burnt sienna in there. With a little bit of it's a cad yellow, but it's actually very, very orange. And I might put a bit of lemon in that just to make it a bit more rusty. And I've got some paper here that I can test my colours out on. That looks quite good to me for this. And then I'm going to want some darks for this area up here. So I'm actually going to use some ultramarine in here, and I might use ultramarine to start my sky as well. So I'm going to mix up, there we are, some ultramarine here. There's quite a lot of pigment in there. Put some in the next well. And I'm going to add in, for my dark, I'm going to add in, wash my brush off, maybe dry it a little bit even, and go back in with a bit of alizarin, which will give me a purple. Need more blue. Right, so that gives me a dark purple, but that is probably a bit too purple. So into that I'm going to add a teeny bit of this orange or yellow, and that should grey it down a little bit. It's still quite vivid. A little bit more blue. And this is one of the joys of using colours that you mix rather than colours that are straight out of the tube. See, I quite like that, and I think I'd quite like it a little bit more blue, is that you get to learn what colours your own paints make. If you're using cheaper brands, they may have different pigments in, they may have mixed pigments, and it's very hard to mix clean colours. It was a question I think Susan asked earlier on my Skool group, which you can always follow the link and join us on there. It's free to join, and we can chat and you can ask questions about colours going muddy. And it's if you mix too many colours together, and if you're working with cheaper paints, you may have colours that look like something like ultramarine, but it's made up of two cheaper colours, and then you find your mixes don't work. And single pigments will give you much cleaner mixes. Right, so I may not have all my colours there, but I've got enough to be going on with, I do believe. So we're going to start with the sky. And I'm going to start with clean water, and I'm going to make my page wet. Now my board is at a slight angle so that the water will run down easily. Oh, dirty water I just used. And I'm not going to come all the way down yet. I'm going to try and paint around my posts, but I might fail. And it doesn't have to join up with the water yet, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to go in with quite a heavy mix of this ultramarine. And it looks darker, you know, you think it looks too dark. And then some cobalt. And I'm working quickly. I'm not going to put any more colour in. I'm just going to let the water make it paler. Then I'm going to dry my brush off, and I'm going to go and pick up, if my brush is dry, I can pick up this bead of water, because if I leave it, it will run back and cause cauliflowers. So I'm just letting that come just gently over the edge of these trees. Ooh, picked up some red. There we are. Right, so I painted over that post, but if I get a clean, dry brush, I should be able to lift that out. There we are. If you're working on good paper with good paints, that is something you can do. I'm going to wait for that to dry a little bit. And then we're going to do this one. So in actual fact, I'm going to come in and do this part. Now I am going to paint right across my posts because I want it to be a smooth wash, but I'm painting around. Even though I don't need to paint around these, I am going to paint around these. Because I want it to be a flatter wash than the painting I did before. I might change my mind and go over them, it doesn't really matter. And that's how we learn, isn't it? You go, oh, that didn't work, I won't do that next time. So, same again, but I want to stick more with the cobalt this time for the water. And it's a bit paler, so I'm going in to the one that I mixed up before. And this colour has a lot of other colours blended into it. But we're going to get the basic wash on first. And yes, it's easier. I'm going to paint straight over these. And as it comes down, I'm going to go a bit darker with a little bit of that ultramarine at the bottom. In fact, I want more ultramarine because it always dries so much lighter than you imagine. So this time I'm going up. You've got to work fast. That's it. And pick up any water on your edges. I might get another actual dry brush. Just to make sure I've got nothing that's not good. Just to make sure I've got nothing that's going to run back. Now, your paper should be drying up here. So I'm going to attempt to put in some of these mixes that I made earlier. So it will run, but it will give us this soft, a bit of a soft background. Don't worry if you paint over these, doesn't matter. It's going to go darker later. Leave yourself some of this area. Softening that. And down that front, I've got this lovely orange. So we've got some of this orange in here. And in here. I hope it will run a bit with that. There's some nice in here. And it's actually a bit more yellow in there. Some of this colour up here. Just drop it in. And now I want some green. So I'm going to go into my blues and mix them with my yellows to give me some greens. A little bit more yellow. I want to work really while it's still a bit wet. Dropping in a few different colours here and there. I want that kind of fuzzy outline in my trees. Now we've got that lovely green, and in hindsight, let's see, here we go, I should have painted that first, but let's put it in now. It's picked up a little bit of the other colour, which is actually quite nice. Okay, so a bit more of my dark. Oh, and that is running, so I want to keep that out of there. I will wait for that actually. Don't do what I do, do what I say. Learn from my mistakes. Put my green back, but I'm not going to let it run too much. Okay. What else? I've tried to paint around my pole here. dry my brush off and see if I can take out some of this blue. As I say, it's not the end of the world if you can't, but a good quality. Oh look, I've got kitchen roll marks on it. Good quality paper, good quality paints, you can lift this out, look. Doesn't matter about the jetty, because we're painting that darker. You can see where it's run back from the bottom of the page, and it's given me some cauliflowers at the bottom. Happy little accidents, happy little accidents. You know who says that? But it's very true. This is now too dry really to do anything about, so I'm not going to worry. I want to finish these trees. Plus also we need to put some reflections in, but let's get our trees done first. So up here we've got some of this orange, and I'm putting it in while it's still a bit wet. And then I've run out of my purple, so let's go in with a bit of this blue. Let those mingle. Some darker bits in. As the paper's drying, you see, you should be able to drop in some darker bits on the bottom. Okay, I quite like the effect of that. Now I'm going to see if this is wet enough to put reflections in. It might have dried too much, in which case we're going to have to go in and wet the paper after. Yeah, it's dried a little bit too much, so I'm just going to dab that out and we'll wet that again. Now, I'm not sure my jetty is actually straight. I think it might be going uphill. That's the trouble with painting at an angle. I've got this natty ruler actually. If you get it on a line, oh look, it goes uphill. So I am just going to mark that. That is flat. That is flat to my board. So if it comes along here, it needs to come along here. Better to do it now rather than later. And that. Needs to come along there. In fact, I need to take that up higher because I've put my jetty up higher there. Well, see, learn from my mistakes. And it's not worth stressing. Right, so most of that should have dried by now. So what I'm going to come in and start doing my jetty. I want a mid-size brush. I mean, the bigger brush you can work with, the better, to be honest, because I mean, you see some of these wonderful artists and they will use one brush for the whole thing. They'll use something like this. Now this is a proper squirrel and I find it's too soft, I can't control it. But if you can get the synthetic ones, I think it's about £14, I think Dana Rowney do one. This is Jackson's one. But they have a lot, they're a lot sturdier, so you've got a lot more control with them. And they hold loads of water and they come to a beautiful point. So, you know, you can see how you could actually just paint with this alone. But I'm not going to. I'm going to make life a bit easier for myself. So this is very dark, but I would still want the same colours that we've used before. So I've got my ultramarine here. I've got my alizarin, and that gives me this really, really dark red. It's a bit more blue. And that actually looks almost black. So the jetty, don't forget you've got reflection under the jetty. And that's above the jetty. And I would like to put in a little bit of other colour in there just to make it a bit more interesting. So I've got that purple. I'm going to add in a bit of burnt sienna, just so there's a bit of variation. I'll probably put a bit of green or something in as well, so maybe a bit of yellow into that, and a bit more blue. A bit of yellow into that purple and a bit more blue. And I'm going to paint around my little boat. So it doesn't look too uniform. I've got to remember also that jetty stops this side above the reflection. Don't go all the way to the end. Because we've got, oh no, I've come down. We've got this piece at the end. Ah, for those of you who have masked out, well, you might only have masked out the boats, so you're probably all right. There is this tiny little bit in here as well, so I might go for an even smaller brush. Just paint that bit in behind that boat. There we are. And it is the it's the difference in the values, the light and dark, and it's this really, really dark here that makes everything stand out. Okay. Now under here we have this reflection, which is quite a dark green. So sticking with my same colours, I've got some ultramarine, and I'm going to go with the orangey yellow, because that will give you more of a sludgy green. So that's actually quite a good colour. And I'm not, doesn't matter too much if it runs, because it's a reflection. I'm painting over my blue lines because I want to hide them now. That's quite a good reflection colour, I think. And in actual fact, if you look at the value between those two, there's very little. So I'm going to add in some of that purple. I think I need to stand up to see if everything's straight. Probably should have stood up to start with. I want that dark, I want that more matched, so you can't really see where one starts and the other stops. That's better. Okay. Right. I'm just checking. Okay, so far so good. Well, a few minor hiccups. I'm going to put some brighter colours in here and some darks and do more of my darks along here. I want to darken this up a bit at the back, and then we can put a wash across here and do our reflections is the word I was looking for. I quite like this bit here. So I'm going to go back to a slightly bigger brush. Make sure it's clean. Wipe it off my bit of tissue that I've lost. So yes, this area I want to darken up a little, not too much. So I've got this lovely purple. I'm mixing that with a bit of this green that I had down here, just to get this a little bit more depth. And that kind of comes across here. I'm going to wet my brush and just put in a bit of water to soften this edge. Clean water, soften this edge. That's it. That's better. And I'm going to do the same with a slightly different colour. This is more blue. I've added a bit more blue in to this one. Again, I don't want a harsh edge, so I'm just drying my brush a little bit and just softening that up with some water. That's okay. I want to darken up these here. But first I want to put some of this orange. So I've got this really bright orange here. In fact, it's not even really orange, is it? It's got a little bit of this green in it. That's quite good. Don't want it all the way along. A little bit of the yellow because it's really quite bright there. Left a couple of little bits of white paper which are useful. Brightening up some of those. Okay, my dark trees at the front. So I've got this colour that I used in here. And this kind of leads into there. It's very dark. And I want a bit of other colour in it, so let's add a little bit more blue. Make it a bit more interesting. around the edge here there's a bit of other colour. I've got a little bit of green left on my palette, but I want something that's fairly dry so that my brush, if you're using paper with texture, should just pick up. That's too much too green. Right, so let's try this. Make it less green. I'm going to put a little bit of red in it. That's better. I don't want it to look... Ugh. Okay, that's kind of a bit better. I've got a bit of tree here. So I'm just holding my brush on the side. Okay, I think that will not too horrendous. It's a little bit darker up here, but you know, now it's a case of just looking and seeing what you think needs a bit more colour. I'm going to put these trees in and I'm going to use the dry brush technique again. I'm going to go for a much smaller brush. We'll go for a very small brush actually. And if I want to use dry brush technique, I want to be able to skim my brush over the surface. So I've got this colour, which is sort of quite a bright colour. So I'm going to add in some of this burnt sienna, but it's too bright, so I've muddied it down. That's better. So I'm just going to gently, with my brush on the side, skip. Try and get my brush to skip over. It's still a bit too wet. I think I caught some water on the paper. That's it. Just scrubbing gently the brush on its side. And I want something a little bit darker than that. So I've got some of that blue. And that's better. So it just looks like there's some trees and stuff in the background. Okay, now I have these tree trunks. They need to be pretty dark. So I'm going back to this colour I used here. And I've got this little brush here which will do fine lines, but I might use my rigger because that can be a little bit more natural because you can't control it very easily. So I need a bit more paint in this. It's not really thick enough. It needs to be a bit more like ink. I go back to my same colours, make my purple. And then put a bit of yellow in it. Right, let's see how this looks. Right, wish me luck. That's all right actually, that's working okay. We'll be going in different directions. Something like that. Okay. We've got a few in here as well. Okay, next we're going to do these reflections and bring it down to here, and then we're going to finish off with our boats and our posts. Okay, moving on. So we've got these reflections here, and you should have on your palette some of the colours that we've already got in the background. I think this is the hardest thing to do. So clean water, and we are going to go across. It doesn't matter if it's not all completely wet, because you'll get a few sparkles. But this actually comes down all the way to meet this reflection here. So I've got some water on there. Then I'm going to go in with some of my darker colours. So along here. Rinse it off a little bit, and then I'm going to just pull it down a bit. And some of that orange. And some of the dark. Just drop some in. Watch where it is, how deep it goes. More of that orange. Probably a better colour. This comes all the way down, there's no blue down here. Okay, and then there's some of that lovely, lovely green. I don't think I wetted my paper quite enough, to be honest. There's some more of this dark here. It needs to be where my trees are. I've put my green probably not in the right place. So let's put that across here. In water, I'm just going to wet this so it runs a bit more, because I think my water had dried, paper had dried. Okay, it's back to dropping in some of this where my trees are. Some of these. There's quite a lot of this colour here. And as it comes down, it gets a bit bluer. And a bit bluer. And it comes right down. That's probably a bit too blue, so I'm going to put in some of this brown to make it match the colour at the front a little bit more. Okay, and then there's some little squiggles. Very I can drop a bit more dark in. Of course, as your paper dries, it will spread less and less. And you know, that's the crucial thing, is knowing when your paper is at the stage where it's not going to run anymore. And that one of the challenges. Okay, I think that's as good as I'm going to get it. I just want that to join up a bit more. Yeah, okay. Right. Now for my boats. What I can do actually, if I've got some clean water, where I have done I've got this all sort of, put my tissue on it. I could just put a wash over and bring that gradually back up. Right. And make sure I dry off that bit of water at the bottom, because that's what caused this run back here. Not dry around the edge of my paper. I am going to lift out that post. My brush has run away from me. Okay. Clean water. Fairly dry brush. That's it. You won't be able to do this if you've used a phthalo, because it will stain the paper. Okay, I'm going to paint my top posts. Am I? Not sure my paper's dry. Now I'm going to go to my boats, because I can keep some of my paint away from my wet water. So got these shadows I'm going to do first, and they're sort of a bit of a purpley blue. So I've got my ultramarine down here. That looks all right, but too dark. Oh, a bit more blue. And I want enough to make sure it's the same colour. Because otherwise you end up with one bit looking a bit purple and one bit looking a bit blue. That's a bit dark and not quite blue enough. Right, so that comes across there. We've got the shadow down here. I haven't rubbed out my pencil lines. Got some shadow here. And that is reflected. It's only reflected to there. I got muddled with this last time. I painted over some of the light bit. What's that? That. This end of the boat. I need to rub this out. And my putty rubber is a bit big. So in my bag of magic tricks, I have one of these. I don't know how to use it, but it's quite precise. Takes some of these lines out. I'll leave them in vaguely because I need something to follow. I just want to clean it up a bit. That has some colour along it. Okay. It's better. Right, back to my little brush. I'm going to come and do this actually while that's drying. So you can see it's very dark one side and not the other. Well, I've already got very dark mixed up. So I'm just going to do a straight line. Wash my brush off, pick up actually some of this orange and come down the other side and let them just run together. Okay, and I think I'm going to have to help that to run because that is still looking like a hard line. That's better. And this should all be dry enough to do this now, but we'll see, shall we? Because I'm going to have a go. It to run off into my reflection. I think that needs to be a bit thicker. I'll put a bit more blue in it, a bit more red in it. Comes down. Orange. Needs to be brighter. Okay. You do find with reflections that light colours reflect darker and dark colours reflect lighter, but I'm not going to worry too much about that because we're only here to have fun. We're not painting masterpieces. Well, you might be. I'm basically just spending an hour chatting to myself. Okay, I think that's looking okay. Now, this bit here, this yellow, you can see my picture, is to do. And that is kind of, it's got a bit of that orange in. It's very pale. It's probably a little too dark, and it's just the bottoms. Put a little bit of darker in there to make it a bit more interesting. In the middle. There we are, that'll do. I'm just going to lift out a little bit there, a little bit there, make it look like it's got a bit of light. light on it. That's fine. There's some birds on the end of that. Right, we're not far off. I didn't put the little float in, and I haven't saved the paper for this, but you can do this with gouache afterwards. So I'm going to finish my boat, so I'm going back into my blue shadow colour that I had. Which now seems to have turned a bit green, probably because I used dirty water. Let's try this one. Better. That comes round there. I'll check the comments in a minute. I can see I've got a delay on the one I'm watching, but I can see somebody's said something. That just needs to lift out so it's the right shape. Where else do we have shadow? It's a bit darker here. I've got some reflected lines. It's very dark under here. And this is a bit darker than on top, but not that dark. Nice orange in there. And there is actually, if you look, there's this lovely glow on this part of the boat. So I'm just putting in a teeny weeny bit of this orange because they're not pure white. Rubber in there. Or eraser to our American friends. What's that? A little bit of burnt sienna in that bottom, I think. I want that to kind of run a little bit. These two posts. And I will smarten that up with some gouache at the end. So I've got a little bit of there's these floats, which I might be foolish trying to fit in, but they're there. Lift a little bit out. There's a hint of them rather than real. So I want to go around the edge here with something a bit darker. This boat actually sits in front of this one. bit of... This is now just a case of looking at the detail for yourselves, really. So there's this blue here. It's very dark in there. That blue looks completely out of place because I used the wrong blue. And I know where in this painting do I have that blue, so I'm going to take that out. Go back to my ultramarine. How's our time? We've been going quite a while, I think, haven't we? Give my boats a bit of shape. Okay, a bit wet paint, wet water, I was going to say. Wet brush, I think was what I meant. And this is darker again under here. Under there. I want to depict, there we are, this little bit here, because I didn't get that right last time, so it's a little bit darker. It's the end of the boat, and it's just a little bit, not that dark. Oh, that's all right. I'll make this a little bit darker as well. Yeah, that will work. And then in there is a little bit darker. And in there. Okay, how are we doing? How's our time? Right, so an hour and a quarter we've done. We are nearly finished. Tighten up some of this around here. It's definitely darker there. And that is darker there. Oh, so I've lost the nice bright white there. I'll see if I can lift that out actually with a very, very clean brush. And I probably haven't quite made my boat deep enough here. That's a bit better. Right, what haven't we done? A little bit more edge on there. I've got some little, we've got some little birds. I think they're cute. Just little odd shapes. I'm going to put some white on them after. How's it looking? I think we're getting there, don't you? Slowly but surely. That needs to come out a bit more. That needs to be in line with that. And it's not. So you won't be doing this because you won't have made all these mistakes that I've made. Well, this is a good opportunity to show you what you can do with gouache. I've got a little bit of white gouache here. I just want this to be a bit brighter, and it comes down a little bit more as well. So I could actually paint over this whole thing and change the depth of those. And plus I've lost the top of this boat. So the purists would be absolutely horrified at me doing this, but it's not going to hang in a gallery anywhere. It's me enjoying myself. Put some little white bits on my birds. And I'm going to put my little, in fact there's two ways you could do this because I've got a white gel pen as well. So you could do it with a white gel pen. That needs to be a slightly different colour because it's under its reflection. And it's got that dark bit in the middle. Okay, and then there's another little one up here. There's another little one up here. I mean, you can go on playing as long as you like. Do I want to put the red one in? I think the red one's quite fun. But I need a nice bright red. So let's get my bright yellow. I don't want it quite as close as it is, and I don't want it as big, so I am just putting it in like that. And I can just now go back in and make my boat a slightly better shape. That comes down here, and this boat actually comes up there. That's a bit better. That's a bit better. But what I don't like about this is it's all different colours. But for now, it's... Oh, I haven't put my reflections. Don't forget to put your bird reflections in. Look, they're down here as well, aren't they? And I think we'll call that a day. you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it and you want to join me next week, we are going to be doing a very simple, well, I say it's simple. We're going to be doing this sort of sunset, or it was actually a morning sunrise, and I learned quite a few things doing this, and I'm going to tweak the colours slightly, but it's going to be very much a tonal exercise, looking at how we can do the clouds in the sky. So same time next week, 7:30, and it would be great if you would come and join us on Skool. We're building up quite a community, and I'm going to put in a coffee chat question time, because you can use it like Zoom, where you can all chat to each other, chat to me, ask questions, and I'm going to be putting some more sort of tips and tricks and learning things in there as well. So thanks so much for joining me, and I hope to see you next week. Cheers everybody.